Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Oh, that was new. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the funnest 30 minutes of your entire Tuesday. Shawn, Lacey book, and the amazing David Meltzer in the house. Welcome to Get Book Solid. What's going on, David Meltzer?
Well, we made it through the multi-birthday bashes over the weekend, and we are on the road and excited about empowering people around the world. And more importantly, I get to see my favorite couple, Shawn and Lacey, in a week or so. Very excited to share the SoFi Stadium Mastermind with you on the 20th of February in the recovering or almost recovering Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm sure that you probably are tired of talking about it, but it's very important to use social media and every platform we have available to communicate information and hope and happiness. Everybody knows that you are in California, but sometimes if we're disconnected geographically from the area, like we think like, wow, I hope that David Meltzer is safe. How is everything from your point of view?
I think people are in disbelief more than anything else. I mean, there was 24, I think, tragic deaths so far. Unfortunately, that's always, for me, the biggest indicator of a tragedy is how many lives are lost, because everything else is meaningless to me. I know the people have lost memories. Those are important as well. But taking care of people is important. So with just my condolences to what it may or must be like to lose somebody in such a horrific way. My heart goes out. I don't think we can conceive economically the impact. And I mean that both as always in the Tao way. Tao means the way. When things like this happen, and the closest I can think of in our lifetime is New Orleans. Complete devastation, a city completely devastated. Pacific Palisades probably have as many homes as New Orleans, just way more expensive. And so it's complete devastation, and it's still expanding, not with complete devastation. These fires that are going on today would be considered horrific. I was in the Rancho Santa Fe fires, and fires that are still going are equal to what was the most, horrific experience as far as my home goes when those fires came through. So I just don't know. When I said the Dow, the economic impact is not only going to be costly, but history has shown when these things happen, people rebuild better and bigger. And there's some inspiration that came from 9/11. We recovered. And this is bigger. I thought they should have built, just to say F you to the Taliban, I thought they should have built a golf course in the middle of Wall Street and not a multi-billion-dollar high rise, because I think that would be the ultimate F you. It's like, dude, we didn't even need those buildings. Now we got a place to play golf in the middle of Manhattan. This is badass. I already know there's golf courses in Pacific Palisades. This was, it'll have a positive impact equal to the negative impact is my lesson.
When you talk about that's a great transition, because when you talk about the financial impact, I think I had mentioned to you when we were in Egypt, Lacey and I are making a transition in some of our messaging 2025 to one of adaptation. That from our healthcare background, basically our belief is that all disease, every disease known to man, is caused not by some outside antigen, virus, bacteria, whatever. It's all caused by our own body's inability to adapt to its environment, either internal or external. I mean, this is why there can be a virus in the air Some people get sick and some people don't. If your body adapts to it, it fights the virus, you're healthy. If it doesn't, you get sick. But we also bring that same philosophy into business, that all business problems are basically due to your business's inability to adapt to its environment, either internal or external. We have things going on in our environment like AI, social media, the way people buy, the economy, all of these things. And then internally, we have teams, we have people that are working with us, and we always have to be adapting. This week, Lacey and I kicked off the new year with the teaching on adapting our finances. It has a lot to do with adapting our mindset. And you brought this up. So listen, a lot of things happen in the world. One, we could look at it from a local level. If I'm a business, and maybe not even a brick and mortar, I mean, if I'm a business, I'm directly affected by a fire in Los Angeles, I mean, I obviously have to adapt. But if I'm in the surrounding areas, I might also need to adapt. Maybe my business is not directly affected, but now the people who I serve are affected. And so my business at a restaurant might be down, and I'm now forced to adapt. One of your great friends that you've introduced us to, Ike, at Ike Sandwiches, Ike Shahada, he adapted. Same with the tacos, adaptation during COVID. I want to talk about, even for people that aren't in crisis, this idea of adapting our mindset. I think it's a really good practice that as we turn the page on a new year, several sort of teachings or philosophies or tactics that we can apply. One of which is the zero-sum approach to our budgeting. Basically saying, if I were to start over, if I were starting my business from scratch today, every expense that I see coming in 2025, would I have that if I were starting over? Would I use that expense? Because it's easy at times too for us to get kind of fat. Why do you have 3 Spotify accounts? Oh, well, because sometimes I'm at the office and sometimes I'm at SoFi or in my car. And if you ask yourself, if you were starting over, would you have that? The answer would be no. What are some thoughts that you have relative to how we might be needing to adapt our mindset and our financial management in our businesses in 2025?
It's really, really interesting that you say that, because it applies to almost everything and is within the context of looking within and certainty within. The only certainty that exists is 2 things. Inside, we have certainty. And then outside, the only certainty there is time. 24 hours is the only certainty that exists. If you and I say, let's tomorrow in the future at noon Pacific time, we would know and be, if we were on time, exactly there at the exact same time. There's certainty to that. If I told you, let's meet tomorrow when we're hungry, we're screwed. And so when we look at our finances, we take inventory inside. Inventory, like you said, of our own knowledge, of our own skills. We have to take of our own circumstances, of non-negotiable certainty of who we are, and then apply the financials to the non-negotiables, and then have a percentage for these negotiables. The circumstances change, the fires, the business closures, the employee changes, whatever they may be. And so it's essential that we take inventory of our finances. In my non-negotiable behavior, health is number 1, which is applicable to what you do. Family is number 2. Finance is a minimum amount of time, which is external certainty, that I apply to studying my finance, paying attention and giving intention to what am I going to do, say, think, feel, and believe about my finances. And at minimum, I'm checking my balances every day. Now, I also have a practice going through my expenses and seeing how they're aligned with what's doing well today, what's stable, and what I think is going to be doing well in the future. So if I have 3 Spotify accounts and it's applicable to what I think is going to be doing in the future, because there's information on Spotify that I need, and I need the ubiquity of having 3 accounts for 3 different locations, the amount of time or emotional expense is greater than the expense of Spotify, then I'm going to go ahead and keep 3 Spotify accounts. And yet as you know, is I do this at least once a month, the full inventory of all my expenses. I always find things that are not applicable to what's doing well, what's stable, or what I'm thinking doing well.
Well, I love this concept because I think there is so much that applies to it. Number one, and I love what you're talking about, when we're looking at our expenses, we always ask ourselves, do those expenses drive revenue, right? Some things are fixed expenses that you need to have in place, like your rent, like your Wi-Fi, your telephone. Those things are necessary to run the business. But then we also get these other expenses that we've accumulated along the way. And if we don't revisit them and ask ourselves, are those actually driving revenue? Then they just become a debt and a cost. And so we always tell our clients, you need to be looking at that and then adapt those to either amplify them. Can you put more into it if they are driving revenue and giving you an ROI, or cut it loose? But secondarily, what you talked about and what you mentioned, I think is really important, is analyzing that expense, also asking yourself, is it in alignment with where I'm trying to go and what I'm trying to do? And energetically, do I feel good about it? Because there also may be expenses and things that you're paying for that drive revenue to the business, but that you don't feel good about doing. Maybe it's somebody that you're working with. Maybe it's a company that you've been with for too long. Maybe it's an expense that you accumulate along the way based off, a recommendation of somebody else. And while it drives a little bit of revenue, it doesn't feel good to you. That also needs to go, because there's inherent energy in those expenses and they all need to be in alignment with what you're doing. And I don't think people analyze on both sides too much.
I think you bring up a really good point, because one of the additions that I put into 2025 and I studied in 24 was I have a quantitative emotional expense column. And that is for employees, for customers, channel partners. And so I think that people need to quantify the emotional expense. So if I spend an hour a day in interference between me and where I want to be or better because of an employee, I pay that employee so much and I'm paid so much. I actually have a quantitative analysis of saying, look, I make, let's say $5,000 an hour, and you cost me an hour. So I'm worried about an employee that costs me $20,000 a month, and 3 times a week, he's costing me $5,000 of interference. I'm taking that into consideration. And I think quantitative measurement in emotional expense, and I do that. And the same works into the asset column. So making wife happy, buying things that I don't think are necessary, but they make her happy, which is the reason I want to make money, is to make my family happy, to provide them things they get enjoyment of. Then I can put it to the positive that, that little, a face brush that cost $110, but it gave me $5,000 of emotional asset because I got an hour of joy.
I'm just making sure he's really listening, like in this time right now.
And I constantly remind myself who's the most important person in my life.
But I think that's so great, because a lot of times we're analyzing expenses and they are just the line items on our expense column. What you're talking about is also looking at the assets, your clients, your partners, your collaborative relationships, your employees, and analyzing that from an emotional expense standpoint. That's not something that we've necessarily consciously added in. I think that we do that, but not like, we don't have like a system around it. And that's so important, because we talk about that all the time. Like, you have to dump the duds, because the duds in your relationship, the bleeders, as you say, the non-feeders, they take up so much more emotional bandwidth than somebody that is feeding you. But what you're talking about is they also take up economic bandwidth, which I think is important to address as well.
I love that. The approach, our friend Dave Steck, the other Dave in our lives, talks about dropping the bottom 10% every year. So he does a quantitative analysis. In fact, David, you would love this, based off of time and ROI. And he even looks at it across every relationship and every endeavor. Now, he is a family office, so he's invested in a lot of things. But what he tries to do is intentionally, even on his investments, drop the bottom 10%. Just say, look, I'm not going to participate in this. And what's interesting, that one is easy to agree with, but he says, and I do that with relationships, that there are relationships that are bleeding me. They're just the bottom 10% of these relationships. And I need to drop those in order to make space, expansive space, to one, have the time, effort, and energy to engage in new prospecting for relationships, not business, but then also culture, nurture, develop, cultivate stronger, deeper relationships with other people. Why is that so hard? The dropping part. It's the dropping part. We get so attached. I even think, like, we watch these shows on people the hoarders, but so many of us, while we're watching that and say, oh, I would never do that, we have hoarding tendencies in other areas of our lives, to relationships, but even back to the context of today's discussion, even expenses. Like, maybe you discover, like, oh, I don't need to have that expense, but I don't want to go through, there's all these apps that get rid of your subscriptions that you're not using. Why is it so hard for us to see that and take action? Why are we attached to these things?
I think there's an element of scarcity. It's the reason the 3-no rule is so important, because the 3-no rule, when applicable to sales, allows you to walk away or leave something or dump something, an opportunity. And so we have a fear of loss. And I know Napoleon Hill teaches that the fear of poverty is greater than the fear of death in most people. The decisions that we make out of fear, the fear of poverty is greater than the fear of death, that people will make decisions on that. I say it's all the fear of loss. And wherever your values may lie, a fear of the loss of a friendship, fear of the loss of an opportunity, fear of the loss of our life, the fear of the loss of a relationship, whatever it may be, that we have to understand the clues and the patterns relative to the fear of loss. So when I have a fear of loss, when I'm afraid of canceling a subscription, that's a fear of loss. What are the clues and the patterns that are inside of me that are creating interference between where me and I want to be? And so for me, it could be that I have in this case, when it's a fear of loss, I may have a need to be abundant, and I feel as if I cancel something, I'm hurting somebody else, right? I'm hurting the relationship when I use the relationship, the opportunity, right? There's a variety of different things that occur. So analyzing our own clues and patterns of how we react to the fear of loss is how we can start to shorten that distance of resistance that's created by it. And so looking deeper into the situations, I've never thought of why I'm afraid of canceling subscriptions, because I do have that feeling. And, there has to be some sort of need that I have that someday I may need that. So I need a luxury, like, look, I have put so much effort, I deserve a reward. So the need to reward ourselves stems into the fear of loss as well. And I know that's part of me, the things that I own that don't make sense, that I should cancel, or cars that I own that I should sell. I know that there's this element that, I still have a need to be rewarded in that way.
Yeah, that's I was just thinking, when you're talking about the fear of loss, how so many people are driven by the fear of loss over the potential of gain, right? And it's like, if you can begin to just shift your mindset and focus on the potential of gain, you can combat that a little bit better. And it's not like you have to be all in. If we can just get to, I'm 51% excited about the potential of gain and 49% scared of loss, then you're winning, right? And then you can overcome the need to hold on to those subscriptions, the need to hold on to those relationships, or whatever it may be. And so I was just thinking, like, how, like, that's what people need to do more. That's what I need to do more, is sit down, meditate, write out, journal about all of the potential of gain by releasing those things. Because it is really easy for your mind to focus on the negative and amplify it into an unnecessary state that it really is not relevant, but your mind is just obsessed over it, and it smashes that potential of gain, and then you can't even see that, and so then you're scared and you hold on to those things for far too long. We've all done it for sure.
Yeah. And that's where timing and risk tolerance lies.
Right.
Yeah. So the last thing in adapting your finances, and that's excellent because we have the fear of loss. And I love that thought of wrapping your mind around that. But I also then want to bring up that a lot of us have the fear of gain, the fear of advancement, the fear of abundance.
Expansion. Yeah.
So if we understand the concept that expenses drive revenue, basically expenses in a business are the gasoline that drive the business. So we have to pay payroll. Why? Because the people drive the business. We have marketing because that drives the business and it's not free. So we have expenses that give the gas to drive revenue. So many of us, as we turn the page into 2025, and this is a very sort of hard pill to swallow for some, we're missing some key expenses in order to get the revenue that we desire. So when you talk about alignment, some of us are not in alignment from the standpoint of, I am just trying to bootstrap this. This became cool. I'm bootstrapping it. I'm doing it all myself. But that is not in alignment with you building a $5 million, $10 million, $100 million company. There are very few exceptions to that rule where one person built this company with zero expenses, right? So one of the other things that we encourage people to do is to think about, meditate, ask for mentorship and guidance, to ask people, what are some of the key expenses that you have, David, that drive your revenue that I don't have? That maybe if I were to add a social media manager, if I were to add a copywriter, if I were to add some element that you have that I don't have, of course it has a cost, but that would represent a drive to me getting more revenue. But then it gets to, but like I have a finite amount of money. I don't know that I could add on an assistant or a social media manager. Help us to overcome that mental block that's stopping us from what's out there waiting for us.
Well, I think one of the key elements is what I interrupted you with, which is you got to know your timing and risk tolerance. Giving yourself an understanding of where am I going to be satisfied if I'm disappointed, but not resentful or guilty. And so when I'm intentional, knowing my timing and risk tolerance, I'll never be resentful and guilty when I fail, be disappointed, but it will be fall within the realm of the timing and risk tolerance that I was able to take. I don't even like the word expenses when it comes to my business expenses. I like to say investment, because I think when I'm looking in the mindset, is this an investment or an expense? An expense has, to me, no ROI. An investment has an ROI. So if I'm investing in a social media manager, then that's okay. If my social media manager is an expense, that's not okay. And so if I can't align my social media manager with my timing and risk tolerance and calculate a test of an ROI on the investment in the social media manager, then I shouldn't prioritize the social media manager. And so for me, by getting timing and risk tolerance and analyzing the ROI in its best estimate, I guarantee myself no emotional expense, which is resentment and guilt, only disappointment if it falls within the realm of my timing and risk tolerance and I miscalculate the ROI. But at least I am being intentional about prioritizing the limited amount of funds that I have today in a pool of an unlimited amount of funds that exist in order to effectuate accessing more of the unlimited amount of funds that exist so that I can have more limits on the funds that I do have. And so if you're not doing a timing and risk tolerance analysis and you're not effectuating aligned with that, some sort of estimate of an ROI, then you're as arbitrary in your decision-making in this as Shawn and I saying, hey, let's meet tomorrow when we're hungry. We got about as much chance of alignment and success in that realm.
How about for you? You've had to cross that bridge.
Well, I think that I agree. I look at things as an investment if I have an expectation of an ROI. And I think that so many people, I mean, even if we backtrack and we're not looking at business expenses, so many people get so energetically saturated negatively around their debt, like their school loans, a business loan, things that if you actually took a step back and looked at, those were investments in yourself. When you went to school and you got a school loan, that was an investment in who you were trying to become. When you got a business loan, that was an investment of where you're trying to get your business to go. And instead of looking at these things as expenses or debt, if you look at it as an investment, you can say, all that money that I put in, or all that money that I took out for school, all that money that I took out for my business was a direct reflection of how much belief I have in myself that that's going to make a huge return. And if you look at those things as you pay them with that perspective and hold that energy, then those things will naturally produce a bigger ROI for you. And so I think there's also the energetic component around it when you're assessing it that's really important. So calling it an investment changes the energy of that dollar amount too, which I love.
What I love is getting to see David Meltzer in Los Angeles. I'm super excited to be heading out there next week. We're leaving out Sunday. We have the Notre Dame Ohio State game coming up on Monday. Who do you have there, David?
You know, I'm a Buckeyes fan, and I got my Apple Watch, and the first what are the screensaver, I guess they call this thing, is of course, oh yeah, baby. I love the Apple Watch. Look at this sucker. That's right. Buckeyes. I'm born in Akron, Ohio. I went to Occidental College, played football there, so I'm absolutely free to root for whoever I want. So go Buckeyes. I got to jump to a speech. I apologize. I can't wait to see both of you. Lacey, you should have. I should change your name to Sage. You should have been named Sage. And so you, wise woman, I appreciate you.
Hit us
All
up.
your decisions are tremendous.
Hit us up if you want to be a part of our upcoming mastermind on January 21st. See you next week, everybody. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to